People had always told me stories about the cannibal family that lived on the island in the lake near my hometown. Most of the stories happened between the early 1800s to the 1950s. The Morneys is what they called them. It wasn't a proper surname. It was just what fishermen of the lake nicknamed them, because it was the only time anyone ever caught a glimpse of them. In the early morning, when darkness still stained a person's vision, the Morneys lived in a secluded nook on the island that was basically an enormous rock poking out of the water. Many people in town refer to it as Avalon after some kind of King Arthur mythology. During the spring and summer, the nook was a lush green sprout on an otherwise uninhabitable stone. During the fall and winter, a person still couldn't make out a thing that went on in that area, because the tightly knit trees and dead vegetation concealed all its secrets like a sturdy house built from bones. The only way to get to this nook was to either rappel down the cliff from the top of Avalon, or take a boat and climb a slimy and steep embankment. It was easy to assume that these tales were concocted by parents that didn't want their kids wandering around the lake at night, so the boogeymen don't gobble them up. And of course, the boogeymen happened to live in a place that was nearly impossible to check out. Yes, I've heard tales about the Morneys all my life, but the idea of them don't have as much bite today as I'm sure they did before the invention of the internet. So a few nights ago, it still didn't have the same bite when our friend Connor decided to regale us with more of these tales. We were hanging out next to the lake, as we have for the last year or so. It has become sort of our nightly thing. Instead of socializing and trying to get with girls like most of our fellow male counterparts did, we just sat under this picnic shelter next to the lake and talked about whatever. Ironically, a lot of it revolved around the idea of socializing more and wishing we could find girls interested in us. That is, when Connor wasn't trying to tell us some sort of crazy story. My friend Caden and I befriended Connor about a year ago. He was the one that had the bright idea of going out here in the first place. We fell in love with the seclusion it offered. Hardly anyone ever came down here except maybe the occasional person hankering to catch a catfish, and even that was rare on this side of the lake. Did I ever tell you boys about the time they found Pete Fleming's head floating around in this here lake? Connor asked. I shook my head. Who the fuck is Pete Fleming? Caden responded after blowing a burst of smoke that danced around his face. He was a kid that went missing in the 90s. I didn't know him either, but my daddy always says you should honor the dead by saying their full name. Well, I guess they found part of him, Caden said with a quasi-sinister smile. Let me guess. You're going to tell us something about the Morneys again? He pointed to the dark outline of Avalon we could easily see that night, due to what was left of the hunter's moon the night prior. Connor looked like he had been caught stealing for a second, but recovered his composure with a grin. Am I turning out to be that predictable? You kind of are, I said warmly, but it's okay. What about this Pete Fleming? Daddy said Pete was often seen playing out here late at night. Connor pointed to the basketball goal with a ratty net, dangling beneath about 100 yards away from the shed. He loved basketball and desperately wanted to play varsity. Problem was, he just wasn't that good, but he sure as hell practiced at that goal a lot. So the Morneys slipped down here one night and grabbed him, Caden interrupted. Connor gave Caden the same grin as before, like it was a default grin set for cynics. You're getting the hang of these stories, Kay. Maybe your daddy, the garbage man, could tell you some whopper tales, and I'll stand here and cut open these stories like a felled deer, just like you do with mine. Caden was taken aback for a split moment. He brought his head down a little. "Sorry, Connor. I won't interrupt anymore." "That's all right," Connor said. "Now, as you all know, my daddy's a deputy for the county, and was then too. He said Pete Fleming must have been down here just about every weeknight. See, his daddy didn't care about what the hell his son did. And he certainly didn't care enough about his son's dreams to get him a damn basketball goal that would set him back less than $50. Wait, Connor, I'm not saying anything bad about these stories, but I'm picking up on the theme," I said. "What's that, Marshall?" "You've told us about a homeless man, the town's only prostitute, a couple of drug addicts, and now an unloved kid," I said. "These are all people that people normally wouldn't miss, and they all hung around the lake." "Well, people may miss the prostitute," Caden chimed in as he snuffed out his cigarette. "Please remember to use the names of the dead," Connor said with a hiss in his voice that reminded me of being scolded by my mom. "Paul Jones, Clara Bennington, Tim Dales, Sue Gregory, and Pete Fleming." Connor recited like he was delivering Hail Marys. "Sorry," I said. "I just forgot." Connor raises his hand up to me. "It's all right, but you're right. The Morneys ain't fools. They almost got too careless in the 50s, but since then they've wizened up. Poor old Pete's dreams were never realized, and because of where he decided to hang out and his home life circumstances, he was picked off. They never found the rest of him. He was the last bit of human remains they ever found in this lake." I looked at Caden, and I think we were thinking the same thing. "So that was what, over 20 years ago? Are the Morneys not killing anymore?" "I wouldn't say that," Connor said, and his face went abruptly grave. "Listen, fellers, I'm going to be honest with you. I was the one that started bringing you out to this lake, but I've started telling you the stories for an entirely different reason." "What's that?" But before Connor could answer, we were cut short by some rectangular headlights glaring from a vehicle I could hardly make out. Whatever it was, it screeched like an eagle caught feet first in a wood chipper. The vehicle veered to the right of us and on down to the other picnic shelter. I couldn't see them anymore since a large rock obstructed the view. I didn't care. I was just glad they turned off that vehicle. "We've met our catfisherman quota this month," Caden said. "Yeah, he really needs to get that belt changed or go ahead and push that car in the lake," I said. We both laughed, but Connor remained grave. "Say, do you fellas want to see what's going on in town?" I didn't know what changed Connor's demeanor, and he certainly never suggested going into town to hang out with the ingenuines, as he called them. Caden dropped his bottle of Orange Crush in the trash can. "I could use a bite to eat, but first let me take a piss." He walked on, down a ways. "Hurry it up then," Connor demanded. There was a moment of awkward silence as the crunch of gravel from Caden faded and was replaced by a faint sound of a liquid hitting the ground in a stream. Obviously, this was Caden pissing, but there was another sound. It sounded like something splashing in the lake. Every now and then, fish will splash to the surface to snag an insect. But this was a repeated sound, and whatever it was, it sounded heavier than a fish barely tapping the surface. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but after that night I thought about it a lot. Connor was looking dreamily at the basketball goal. "Something on your mind?" I asked. Connor jumped at my question. "Nah, I'm sorry. I'm just getting kinda tired of this place." I nodded, not knowing what else to say. We saw Caden running back toward us. It was strange. He was silent, as he sprinted our way. But with a look on his face, it seemed like it should have been coupled with screaming. I grabbed the keys in my pocket out of instinct, ready to get in my truck and take off if I had to. Caden stopped in front of us. "We need to get out of here," he said in a low and exhausted voice with wide eyes that told me he was absolutely serious. "What?" But before I could say anything else, Caden said, "That guy that drove by us, he's throwing something in the lake. I heard splashing sounds as I was pissing, so I peered behind the rock. I don't know what it was. It looked like jars. A lot of fucking jars." "That is pretty weird," I said. "But no! God damn it, I want to get out of here." "He saw me looking at him. He looked." "He saw you?" Connor asked, looking even more distraught than before. "Yeah, okay, Caden, we'll get out of here." I walked toward my truck in a hurry, but Caden, who rode with me, was already at the passenger side door jiggling the handle. "Hurry the fuck up, Marshall!" Caden yelled. I unlocked my truck via the remote on the key. "I'm right behind you guys," Connor said. He'd driven separately. "Just head on home. I'll see y'all at school tomorrow." I nodded at him, and we were out of there. The next day at school, I felt a little unnerved. It seemed silly to be worried about a strange occurrence that happened at the lake. I mean, chances were pretty good to have at least a few weird moments in any particular spot if you're there enough. But knowing some oddball stranger was tossing jars in the lake, and Caden's extreme reaction was unsettling. Caden hardly reacted to anything, and I wondered if there was something else he wasn't telling us. It wasn't until after school that I saw Connor standing outside next to the soda machines. "Have you seen Caden today?" he asked as soon as he saw me. I didn't have any classes with either of them this semester, but I knew Caden had government with Connor. "No," I said. "Was he not in class with you?" Connor shook his head. "Which one of you butt monkeys put this on the hood of my car this morning?" Caden's voice rang out behind us. When we turned around, we saw him standing there, looking as livid as a cat poked one too many times, and holding an empty mason jar that had something taped on its side. I looked at Connor, who returned my gaze, and we both looked back at Caden like animals caught in the death lights of the open road. "I'm guessing Connor, but you can be pretty sly sometimes too, Marshall," Caden said, refurbishing his accusation. "I didn't do it, man. I was actually a little worried about you, believe it or not. You didn't show up at government after what happened last night, and now..." "And now what?" "Now I'm even more worried." I stared at Connor bug-eyed, not really knowing what to say except, "I didn't do it either." "One of you had to do it. It's not a joke anyone except you all would get. It even has my name written on tape right here." He pointed. "When I first saw this, it scared the shit out of me. I didn't want to leave the house. I guess I'll just have to get both of you back if no one wants to fess up." He cradled the jar under his arm and walked away. I figured Connor was obviously the one that did it, but was really committed to the joke. He even played the concerned friend part very well as he ran after Caden. That evening, Connor and I decided to play video games at my house. I called Caden up to see if he wanted to hang out at my place instead of going to the lake. There was no fucking way we were going back to that place. I could still tell Caden was a little pissed about the jar Connor placed on his car, but he agreed to come out a little later. We were watching Avengers: Infinity War when I looked at my watch and realized it was getting late. Caden still hadn't shown up. I suggested we get some fresh air, and Connor followed me outside. "I wonder what's taking him so long," I said. "I think this is his way of getting back at us. Either through passive-aggressively flaking out on us or hiding in the bushes somewhere? You did it, right? Connor asked, like a parent gently trying to coax the truth out of their child. What? The jar? I asked. It was you. It had to be. Connor solemnly shook his head. He looked like he was going to be sick. Geez, you don't have to lie about the whole thing to me, Connor. Kay's not here. It wasn't me, man, Connor said. Caden must have gotten looked at real good by the ferryman. My heart dropped when he said this. Did he just give the guy throwing jars in the lake a name? The ferryman? I questioned. But before I could get more information out of Connor, we heard something moving in the surrounding woods above my house. Deer run around here all the time, but it didn't sound like the frolicking cadence of a deer. It sounded like shuffling and dragging. It stopped and a different sound took its place. Clinking. It was a sound heard when glass touched glass. I bet that's that son of a bitch trying to scare us, I yelled in the general direction of the sound, not caring if I woke my mom. Connor placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Don't." No, I am fed up with this shit, I said. It's probably the both of you trying to scare me. I saw you go after Caden earlier. That ain't what that was about. My phone started buzzing in my pocket. I fetched it and saw the caller ID read Caden's name and number. I answered it immediately with relief. Please tell me that's you in the woods, Caden, I said as soon as I pressed the answer button on the touchscreen. But I only heard what sounded like leaves moving around. It corresponded with a movement above us. Heavy breathing caused a vibration from the phone speaker to tickle in my inner ear in a sickening way. I knew that if I could see myself, I'd see the color drain right out of me. And yet I held tightly to that phone, waiting to hear, "Gotcha!" Instead, the breathing manifested into a voice too deep and gargled to be Caden's. "It's me in the woods," the voice said. I instantly ended the call. "Get inside, Connor." "I'm sorry about all this, Marshall. I'm sorry I ever took you to the lake at night. Those stories..." Connor paused. "They were real stories. I told them to y'all so you wouldn't want to go back." "You're not saying this has something to do with the Mornies?" "It's too late. Go inside. Lock your doors and pray he doesn't see your face or learn your full name." Connor ran to his car parked across the street and didn't even so much as turn and look back, no matter how much I called for him. My thoughts ran wild all night as I laid in bed. The man with the jars, Caden receiving a jar, the clanking sound from the woods, Connor's behavior. But what resonated the most was the call from Caden's phone. Maybe it could still be a prank call with a voice changer, I thought. But I couldn't get it out of my head. It's me in the woods. The compilation of all these thoughts circulated all night, with my eyes wide open. I stared at the ceiling until the morning dawn broke and there was a knock on the front door. I could hear Mom talking to someone downstairs, but I remained in bed until she called for me to come down. When I saw who it was at the door, I was more than a little alarmed. A large, disheveled cop in the doorway. His hair sprung out from his hat like thirsty bushes. He had dark circles around his eyes and greeted me with a smile that looked like he brushed his teeth with a fucking candy bar. The cop looked me over for an awkward moment and finally spoke. "Hey, Marshall, is it? I'm Deputy Reynolds. I think you know my boy Connor." "Is he okay?" I asked, thinking whatever was in the woods last night followed him. "Connor's fine. Grounded, but fine." Deputy Reynolds looked at my mom. "Ma'am, you mind terribly if I talk to your boy out here on the porch in private?" My mom excused herself, but not before letting me know she'd be in the kitchen if I needed her. I anxiously followed the brood of a man outside. I'd never seen Connor's dad. Come to think of it, I didn't even know where Connor lived in our town. They sat outside in the chairs on the porch as Reynolds brought out a notepad and pen from his pocket. "Is it just you and your mama here?" I nodded. "How's school?" "I guess it's fine." "Connor says you keep a low profile and your nose clean. I like that." I was feeling a little irritated at this point. Maybe it was due to my lack of sleep mixed with a fucked up situation, but I really couldn't handle the small talk, Connor's dad or not. "Can you tell me what this is about, officer?" "I'm gonna make this quick and painless, I always do. When's the last time you've seen Caden Fields?" the deputy asked. I didn't see any reason not to be cooperative. "I saw him yesterday, just as school let out, and I talked to him on the phone yesterday evening, asking him to come over," I answered, not mentioning when Caden allegedly called last night. The deputy wrote something down in his notepad, which led me to notice his long, dirty fingernails. I wondered how the hell this cop got away with looking so unkempt. "I don't suppose he showed up though, did he?" The deputy gave me an inappropriate brown smile. I shook my head. "No, sir." "Marshal, I don't want to scare you, but we found Caden's car just about half a mile down the road. It was in a ditch." Deputy Reynolds took a few seconds to cough. "We've got officers investigating it right now, so I can't say much more about it. His parents called and said he was supposed to come to your house, but never came back home last night. Do you know anything else about what could have happened or where he could be?" the filthy police officer asked. His droopy eyes were fixated on my own, which must have looked tired and bloodshot. That voice over the phone last night kept playing through my head. I decided to tell him just about everything I knew, and that included the man throwing jars in the lake, the jar on the hood of Caden's car, and the weird phone call I got from Caden's phone. After hearing this, Reynolds seemed lost in thought. "That's damn strange," he finally said. "Isn't there anything you can do about it? Can't you take my phone and find out where his phone is?" I asked, pretty much guessing it was impossible. The oddly unsympathetic Deputy Reynolds just smiled that hideous smile and stood up, towering over me. A sweaty scent that put me in mind of onions waved its way up my nose. "I don't reckon we've reached that kind of technological advancement yet. What did you say your last name was again? I need it for the record." "Deal," I said. "Marshall Deal." "Look, don't I need to make a formal statement or something?" The large man wrote one last thing down. "Nah, I've got what I need for now." He stuffed the notepad in his pocket. I wanted to ask Reynolds more questions regarding Caden's disappearance, but I figured he'd brush them off, and to be honest, I wanted him to leave even more. He didn't seem right. "I'll be in touch, Marshal. Thanks for telling me everything you know. I'll tell Connor you said hello." The rest of the day and night, I never heard back from Caden or Connor. I was worried about Caden, but I honestly didn't like thinking about the situation as if it were dire. I kept thinking, or at least fooled myself into thinking, it was a very elaborate prank. A prank that involved Connor and some homeless guy that got to pose as a police officer. Honestly, how could that slob have been a cop? The only thing he did was tell me Caden was missing and asked for my full name. My full name. Why did that sound familiar? I just wanted to sleep off the day. If Connor and Caden wanted to single me out, then so be it. I slept through most of the day and all night. The only time I woke up was when I heard some kind of loud screeching outside, but I fell right back to sleep. I really don't know what to think anymore. This morning, I got up to go get some breakfast. Mom was sleeping off a drinking bender and didn't hear me scream like a 5-year-old. On the hood of my truck was a large glass jar. I could see the label from a distance and read it as I approached. It read Marshall Deal on some dirty masking tape clung to the side. Is this a prank? I don't know. I stayed in my room all day and I haven't been on any bit of social media until now. Fear of someone mentioning Caden being missing might take away my only sliver of protection. Denial. As the minutes of this night tick away, my denial receives another crack, ready to shatter. I've been getting calls from Caden's phone over the last hour. I refuse to answer them because I'm nearly certain I'll hear that voice again. The one that said it's me in the woods. But that pales in comparison to what I hear right now. Screeching outside. The same screeching that woke me last night. And the same screeching I heard that night at the lake. I'd call the police, but I'm not sure the police would be concerned. The only thing I do is sit here and wait. I may be the victim of an epic prank. Or I may be stuffed in a jar and thrown in the lake along with Caden by what Connor called the ferryman. Just another couple of boys no one will miss. If I don't update this, I guess you'll have your answer. But please honor the dead if you ever mention this story. We were Caden Fields and Marshall Deal. At least then we will be remembered as more than just the names of what is being served for the day in a place the town calls Avalon. Hey guys, Ali here. Thanks so much for stopping by and watching my video. If you made it this far, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications if you want more videos just like this one. And if you are so inclined, follow me on social media and support me on Ko-fi. All links are listed in the description box below. Thanks, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye!